Okay. Now, if we can figure out, there we go. Okay, so for the sake of this training, the way we're going to define boundaries is this, and it's a little hard to see, so I'll go ahead and read it for you. It says professional boundaries are ethical limits that define the scope of a professional relationship and ensure it remains safe and effective. Okay, so this is kind of a broad definition of what boundaries look like in any professional environment. So I invite you to think about how this applies to the work that we do here at Learning Lab. Okay. So before we get into really the meat and potatoes of it, based off of that definition of boundaries, why do you think that maintaining boundaries might be important, especially in settings like Learning Lab?
For effectiveness.
Effectiveness. Ooh, I love that word. Good. What else?
Maintain objectivity, purpose.
Okay, great.
Respect for our students.
Yeah, wonderful. Anybody else like to share? Those are all spot on. Here are some that I came up with. Avoiding burnout. As volunteers, we ask a lot of you guys, and you're giving so much time and energy to our program, and we're so grateful for that. We don't want to ask you to give more than is kind of required or maybe expected when you become a volunteer. Going above and beyond can feel super good, but it can also lead to maybe feeling like, okay, I'm giving too much, I need to take a break. We would rather keep you here because we need you. Next, fostering appropriate relationships. At Learning Lab, this is a very special place where we kind of feel like one big family. And I think that is a beautiful thing. However, it's still really important to maintain those boundaries in order to keep it in a healthy place. When things become too personal, sometimes it can get a little sticky, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Increased productivity. I love the word effectiveness. Students are giving their time, volunteers are giving their time, and teachers as well are working really hard to make sure classes are the best they can be. We want to make sure we use the time that we have in class well. Improving communication. It's good for students to be able to know what to be able to expect, no matter what tutor they're with for the day. And so kind of keeping that consistent across the board really helps the students know this is, even though I was with so-and-so one day, it's going to be kind of the same deal with the other tutor the next day. Just kind of expectations and communication wise. And I'm getting ahead of myself, shared expectations. And the last one, which is kind of the big one, is avoiding legal repercussions. And this has to do with protecting Learning Lab, and this has to do with protecting you personally. I know in the past, Learning Lab played around with different things like giving students rides and things like that. We cannot do those kinds of things anymore for this exact reason. We want to make sure for insurance purposes and all of that good stuff that we are keeping our boundaries and holding those so that we're not getting into any trouble with the law. Okay? Any questions, comments, concerns about these before we move forward? All sounds good. All right, wonderful. Okay, some ways to kind of think about how do we even get started setting boundaries? What does that look like? So the first thing that helps me in my job to set boundaries is to keep in mind the mission of Learning Lab, which in essence is personalized education. That's what we're here to provide. We want to help people on a personal level, give them the education that they are seeking. So anything outside of that scope, we really should be asking ourselves, should I be doing this? Am I an expert in this? Maybe if they need help beyond what I can give them, we can refer them to somebody else. We have a very singular purpose here at Learning Lab, and we want to operate within that because that's what we're good at. That's what we're here for. Okay. Consider your role as a tutor in the organization, thinking about why are you here? What types of things did Jen tell you about when she onboarded you that would be expected of you as a tutor? We are so grateful for all of the assistance and wonderful insights that you bring into our classes, and we love for you to flourish within that role. We don't expect for you to go and do more than is expected, kind of like we already talked about. If you're feeling a little stuck in a situation, maybe you're not sure, is this over the line, is it not? You're always welcome to talk to the teacher in the class. We do have different resources that we know of in the community that we're able to refer students to. I know a big one is, an easy example would be when students are needing help filling out their citizenship applications. There is a place that we send students to do that. We do not do that, again, for those legal purposes. That's a official document. And so different things like that, we know where the experts are, and we want to send them to them because they're good at doing that thing. Another thing to keep in mind is just be sensitive to where the student's coming from. A lot of our students come to class with a lot of heavy things. They may be coming with trauma or coming from hard home lives, a whole range of things. And so they may be saying things or doing things that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Depending on the situation, we want to be sensitive to that as well as hold the boundary. That doesn't mean just doing maybe whatever they're asking just because things are hard. We want to help in the best way possible that's going to keep them safe as well as you safe and Learning Lab safe. Respect the time and goals of the student. Like we talked about, our time here at Learning Lab is so valuable because these students' lives are so busy and your lives are so busy. So we want to make sure that when we are in this building, when we're in our tutoring sessions, that time is being used in a way that is honoring the student and honoring you. And last one, which can be so hard, practice politely and firmly saying no. And this can look like maybe doing some role play. I know sometimes that feels kind of silly, but if you're not familiar with what it looks like to set a boundary, what kinds of things you can say, what kind of language to use, it can be really helpful to practice that in safe situations. And if you want to pull aside the teacher and say, hey, I've been talking to so-and-so, my student, and they've been asking me for this thing. Can I practice with you how I can respond to them in the tutoring session? I can guarantee you any of our teachers here would be happy to do that with you. So sometimes it just takes a little practice to get comfortable with. Okay, questions, concerns about any of these things? Yes, Pete.
This has not come up in my brief time here, but I often wonder if there are social service things available in the community that I don't know about, that in the course of talking to a client about their mentioning their family, and you sort of hear there's a problem with maybe transportation or logistics. Is there a place within the Learning Lab that we can refer them to get that information, or
As far as transportation goes?
or any social service maybe type issue?
Yeah, I would say that I would take that like with a kit for a case-by-case basis to the teacher of that student. The teacher might possibly be aware of something else, maybe that the student told us about when we did our intake with them. And so we might be aware, or they might be getting help elsewhere. So I would say maybe just case by case, take that to the teacher and see what kind of resources you can find together. Sometimes it might take, the teacher might need to go and escalate that even more and ask Jen, hey, do you know of any resources? But we're definitely always going to be willing to find what the student needs. Awesome.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
A little unclear on point 6.
Yeah.
You say no to.
Yeah. Okay. We're going to actually get into that. We're going to talk about like some specific things that we want to keep our boundaries on. And I think it might become a little bit more clear what kinds of things we would be saying no to. Thank you for bringing that up. Anybody else? Okay, wonderful. Moving right along. Here are some things that we should be sensitive of within our tutoring sessions and within the class as a full. I would say for me, as my time as an educator, I have noticed mostly these things coming into the classroom at the beginning of class, when maybe it's mostly tutors sitting in the classroom and we're having chit chat. We love that time to get to know each other and to grow closer together. However, there are some subjects that we would still like to keep outside of the classroom. So, do we have any ideas of what some of those subjects might be? What ideas do we have? Yeah,
Politics and religion.
thank you. Yes. Politics. We're gonna talk more about that.
Politics.
Yes. Anybody else?
Personal life things.
Yeah, maybe just getting a little too personal. Yeah, perfect. Good. Okay, number one on my list is politics. I think sometimes this looks like walking into the classroom and saying, oh my gosh, did you see the debate? Can you believe it? Maybe you're not saying whose side you're on. Maybe you're not saying how you feel about it. I would venture to say, let's not mention it at all. We want this to be a safe place where maybe someone's coming because I don't want to think about that anymore. Maybe they're being bombarded outside of this building with news about the election, with news about this and that. And we just want this place to feel like you don't have to worry about those kinds of things here. Okay. Another thing that I want to mention about politics is I think sometimes we may sit in our classrooms and assume that the person on either side of us has the same political opinion that we have. And that is not always the case. We serve a wide variety of people here at Learning Lab, and we have so many tutors that have a variety of life experiences, and we all come with our own opinions. And so to assume that everybody believes the same thing is not a safe assumption. So I think to keep it safe, I just keep it out altogether. And that way you don't even have to worry about it. All right. Next one kind of goes along with like personal life. Asking too many prodding questions about family. A lot of times we'll have lessons that mention family, right? It'll talk about mom, dad, brother, sister. We're learning those vocabulary words. Hopefully that feels safe. If you get the sense that that is not something that the student wants to talk about, you're welcome to mention that to the teacher and say, hey, I know this is in the lesson, but it just feels like it's making the student upset or maybe uncomfortable. We're always happy to accommodate that kind of thing. But I think mostly students are wanting to learn those types of words, and this kind of goes more into asking, you know, where's your family? Where do they live? How long have they lived there? Oh, you're trying to get them here? That's so hard. And we want to be, you know, empathetic and kind to these students, but maybe they don't want to talk about that here. Maybe that's hard for them. And so if the student brings it up, I would say tread with caution, you know, obviously be listening, but maybe don't dig deeper than they offer up, I think would be a good way to go about it. All right. Current events. I say if you saw it on the news, leave it at the door. There's so many things to talk about. And of course, this goes for more things that we can talk about the solar eclipse or whatever. That's exciting. But things like, oh my gosh, did you hear about that school shooting? Or did you hear about the war that's going on, you know, here and there? Or we just don't want it. We don't want it here because it can make people feel uncomfortable. We don't know what kind of things they've dealt with in their past. And that might be very painful for someone to even hear it mentioned in the same room as them. Okay, so let's keep it light. Let's keep it fun and keep things happy in our classrooms. Religion we talked about. Sometimes, again, this may come up in a lesson or a student might want to share with you. If you feel comfortable with that, then I think that's totally fine. Again, it kind of goes back to that digging deeper and asking more and more. Sometimes students kind of want to keep that type of thing private. It kind of depends, right, on the student, but just respecting what kinds of things are personal to the student and they may not want to share. And the same goes for money. We have money lessons. Keep it appropriate. We want to, obviously, we're not going to be asking students, you know, how much are you making per hour? Oh my gosh, that's way too little. You should go to this place and work here. It's just not our place. That's not what we're here for. Okay. And so just keeping things kind of sticking to the lesson. And again, if you feel like it's making the student uncomfortable for any reason, please let the teacher know and we would be happy to go about it a different way or skip the lesson or whatever it might be. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns about these big ones? Yes.
On family, I should know this, but I don't. So when you bring a student in on your intake forms or you're talking to them, how much do you get to know what they've been through? Although not sharing with us, but do you
Sure.
find out things about them?
Only if they offer up. We really don't get any information like we get the country that they are coming from, where they were born and how long they've been in the United States. But generally, I mean, we don't ask for more than that. Every once in a while, a student will tell us. And of course, we listen and things like that. But we're not recording that anywhere. We're not like putting that on any sort of record. It's more of sometimes a student wants to share, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what to do if you feel maybe a little uncomfortable about what a student is sharing. Yeah, great question. Yes.
When I'm tutoring, it's usually, you know, a variety of different people, from the very most basic learning English words to people that have advanced degrees. And I
Yeah.
often wonder to myself, you know, why are these individuals here? What are their goals? And I think that's probably part of the intake.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I would wonder, you know, again, is it appropriate for me to ask a question, you know, what is your goal? Or should I just be following the lesson plan and just assume blindly that, you know, whatever is in the lesson plan is really what they're after?
Yeah, I think if you are asking about, you know, what is their academic goal here at Learning Lab, I don't see any problem with that. I know me personally in my classes, I have on the progress page of the student where the tutors write at the very top, it says student goal. But that might vary from teacher to teacher, but I don't see any problem with that. Occasionally a student might be coming here for community and maybe less of an academic goal. And if that's the case, that's okay. But yeah, I think if you are wanting to know how you can better help as a tutor, I don't see any problem with talking to the student about that or the teacher about it. The teacher should know their goals because we're planning their lessons. So yeah, great question. Okay, wonderful. Moving right along. Respecting class time, we've kind of already beat this to death, but honoring students' time, your time, the mission of Learning Lab by following the lesson plans. If you feel like the lesson plan is so off from what the student told you they want to work on, or they're telling you, I don't care about this, this is not what I want, please tell the teacher. You spend so much more time with the students one-on-one than we do. That information is so valuable to us. We would love to know that. So definitely feel free to say, hey, the student told me that this isn't actually helping them get to their goals. Or I got the sense that maybe they want to work more on conversation and we've been doing a lot of work on writing. Is there anything maybe we can do one type of lesson one day and one type the other day? It does go back to maybe the teacher knows about an end goal. Maybe the student told the teacher that they eventually want to get to GED and that's why they're working on that kind of thing. But it certainly does not hurt to keep the teacher informed. We really appreciate that. Spending an appropriate amount of time on the materials provided. This kind of goes for, as an example, many teachers, if not all of us, I think, give warm-up questions before we start the lesson. Spending the entire class period on the warm-up questions is maybe not exactly what we have intended in our lesson plan. If it's the student's goal to work on conversation, well, then we should hopefully have a separate lesson that addresses that goal. But this kind of goes for a general rule. Sometimes a student really is just struggling and you spend the whole lesson on one part. You don't need to feel bad about that. As long as it's not something that's happening every time. If it's happening every time, maybe the lesson is too difficult for the student. And again, you would hopefully inform the teacher of that. Okay, so it doesn't mean that you always have to finish the lesson either, but just hopefully not spending the whole time talking about what you did last weekend. Unless that's the lesson plan given to you by the teacher, in which case, go for it, right? And the 80-20 rule. Who's familiar with the 80-20 rule? What does that mean, Marie?
The teacher talks 20% of the time, the student talks 80% of the time.
Yes. This is so hard. And it's okay that it feels hard, but this is our dream, right? This is our goal for the student to be speaking 80% of the time and the teacher to be speaking 20% of the time. If you're feeling like in your tutoring sessions, it's often reversed, think about what you can potentially do to elicit more from the student. Maybe the student really has very little English. That's okay. They might not do 80% of the talking, but hopefully it's not the other way around where we're talking at them and overwhelming them either. Okay, so really what this means is hopefully just maintaining a balance within your tutoring sessions of who's talking when. And if you feel like you're talking a lot, maybe just take a step back, ask more questions, focus right back on the lesson and see what you can have the student do. Okay? Perfect. Any questions, concerns about these? Can be tricky, but we're always working towards being better, me included. Okay, exchanging information. Please do not share personal information, such as phone numbers, with students, especially during class time. Okay? We get really close with our students, especially maybe we've been in the same class with the same student for 3 years, right? And you feel like, I know this person, they're my friend. Why would they not have my phone number? It just can get a little, like we said before, sticky. Maybe the student begins to text you and ask you for personal tutoring outside of Learning Lab. Maybe they text you and ask you for rides. It can be really difficult to say no because you want to help. Maybe you have the time, maybe you have the resources. If we refrain from sharing that personal information in the first place, it's keeping you safe and it's keeping the students safe. We all have the right to keep our personal information private. Even me as a tutor, I have a separate work phone app on my phone, and I have a separate phone number that I give my students. Even though it goes to my personal phone, it's separate than my personal phone calls, my personal text messages. And I really appreciate that separation. It's good for me to maintain my work-life balance. And even though maybe this is not a formal working situation, it still is good to be able to be outside of Learning Lab when you're outside of it and be here when you're here, right? Wonderful. Okay, now let's get to what do we do if a student shares more than we feel comfortable with? I had a situation, I think it was my first semester teaching even. I had a student who was sharing with me his story about coming to the United States, which was absolutely heart-wrenching. And then he also shared with me a picture of his a family member who was deceased. And that made me very uncomfortable as his teacher. And it was right before class started, and then I had to put on my smile and teach class. We just want to protect you and your mental and emotional health, as well as, just keep things appropriate. And so always being polite and sensitive. Of course, we're never saying, oh, no, I can't talk about that. Stop right there. That's not the way to go about it, probably. We're still gonna be kind and understanding in the situation. We can always ask the student, hey, do you wanna take a break? If you need to go get a breath of fresh air, maybe go get a cup of coffee. I think that is always appropriate. If you really are feeling like your student needs to step away, your teacher might ask you, hey, it's not break time yet. Just say, oh, so-and-so really, we started talking about families and it got kind of hard to talk about, and we're just gonna take a quick break and then get back to it and maybe move on to the next section. I guarantee that we would all be just okay with that. Redirect the student to the work if things are kind of going off track. Oh, hey, didn't you say that you wanted to get better at pronouns? Here, let's work on that. I want to honor your time and I know you have a goal. Let's get you closer to that goal. And again, ask the student about their learning goals. That kind of helps us both, the teacher, the tutor, and the student think about, okay, why are we here? Let's focus on that. And that'll keep us away from maybe talking about things that might be inappropriate for the classroom. And then as a last resort, you can get the teacher. We are happy to come in, take a seat with your student. Hey, what's going on? Is there something we can do for you? Do you need to leave for the day? If you need to leave early? And this, of course, is a case-by-case basis. But if you feel like the student is sharing something with you that makes you feel uncomfortable, please take action against that. And that sounds a little harsh, but protect yourself. And that is important. We care about you guys equally as much as we care and love for our students. So please do whatever feels appropriate in that situation to do that. Okay? Questions, comments, concerns? Yes, please. No, please.
So I know there's a little free counseling sheet.
Yes.
So if a student starts talking about maybe their past or some history that could be troubling for them,
Yeah.
is it appropriate for us to give them that sheet? Do we talk to the teacher and say, this student might benefit from this? How do we do that?
Yeah. I would say when in doubt, maybe refer to the teacher. The teacher may be aware of some additional things that might be helpful in the situation. We might be aware of, something they told us on intake that might, we know that they're working with a caseworker on this or whatever it may be. And also as a teacher, we would love to know if there's certain things that we need to steer clear of when planning lessons or things we need to be aware of with the student. And so I think it's really helpful to hear from the tutors and for you guys to share with us what concerns you have. And then as well, it kind of protects you personally. Maybe the student does go to that counselor and they hate it and it was horrible. They're not gonna come at you and yell at you, right? We don't want that to happen. And so if you leave it to the teacher, that kind of helps you keep a healthy distance from that and protect you again.
Do the students get that little information when they come in?
Not generally. It's more of a case-by-case basis.
What form is that, you know?
I picked it up, it was in the entryway.
Mhm.
Oh, okay,
It's just
oh, it's
a
something
little-
that's out in the, okay.
Yes, it's just one small sheet
Uh-huh.
that says free counseling,
Oh,
call
okay.
this
I
number.
guess I've never seen it.
Yeah, I think that was a special program for this summer. I'm not
Oh.
sure if it's continued on, but I think it was the Boise School District maybe was offering free counseling during the summer. But different things like that type of information gets passed to Jen and then Jen passes it out to us. And so there may be flyers around, but yeah, maybe just mentioning to the teacher, hey, it seems like they really benefit from this. I gave them that paper, or would you give them that paper? Whatever you feel comfortable with. But again, we just want to keep you guys in a place that feels really comfortable rather than crossing a line that may maybe jeopardize your relationship with the student or whatever it might be. Yeah. Anybody else? Such good questions. I really appreciate you asking those. Okay, language boundaries. Relying on translating and tutoring sessions. Some teachers are more lenient on this than others. It's not a learning lab policy necessarily. However, I would say that if you're using translating excessively in your tutoring sessions, then why is the student here? They already know how to use their translator. They can use that outside of learning lab. We want to teach them how to not use their translator, right? And so please use translators as a very last resort. Me, as someone who has learned another language, and I'm sure many of you as well, know that there is value in struggling to find the word, in not knowing the word and saying it in a different way. Those are really instructive, valuable moments. And so to just translate the word kind of robs the student of that. Now, sometimes it's frustration. You've gone about it every way, you've performed it, you can't get the student to know what you're talking about. In that case, turning to a dictionary or using a translator maybe would be appropriate, but I would say very last resort. Getting to know all languages, cultures, and students equally. This is something that I have to check myself with because I am fluent in Spanish, and so it feels easy for me to talk to my Spanish speaking student after class in Spanish. And it feels like a really cool moment where I get to know them better. However, it's good for me to question myself, am I giving all of my students that same level of attention? Obviously, I can't speak Farsi. And so really kind of looking at that and thinking, is that fair? Maybe outside the classroom it's appropriate, but within the classroom, if you're requesting to be with a Russian speaking student because you speak Russian, it's great to have that bond with them. However, are you able to have that same relationship with all the students? That's what our goal is, so everybody feels equal, everyone feels welcome. And so just something to consider when we're thinking about language boundaries. Okay, outside resources. This is referring to a student might ask you, hey, again, I need help filling out my citizenship form. Can I bring it in and you help me with it? Or I have an example in one of my classes, one of my students needed a new garage door. She was asking her tutor, do you know of anybody who does garage doors? Please ask the student for permission to share with the teacher. Hey, I don't really know if I know, but can I share this information with the teacher? Maybe they can point you to the right direction. It's kind of what we already talked about, but we don't expect you guys to be experts in everything. The same way that I am not an expert in everything. I'm not a caseworker, but I am absolutely happy to point the student in the right direction, maybe even make that phone call with them if it's appropriate. But we can't know everything and we don't know everything. And so we're really doing the student a disservice to try to be an expert in something that really is not what we're here for. And so pointing them towards someone who's better equipped to help is always the right way to go. This is my rule of thumb. Who can read this for me? Loud and proud, somebody. Please, Marie, thank you.
Do not provide a service to one student that you cannot provide to every student.
Okay, thank you. If it's not something you can do for everybody, then maybe don't do it just for one person. Because then we're maybe having favorites, we're creating a culture of inequality, and that's not what we want here. If you cannot buy a book for every student, then maybe don't buy a book for one student. And then that student tells everybody, Learning Lab gives out free books, go there, get free books. And then we say, we didn't give out free books. Where did you get a free book? And they say, oh, my tutor bought it for me. And we're like, oh, that's so kind. However, not something that we can do for everybody. So just keep that in mind when you're questioning, is this appropriate? Is it not? Should I not? Is it something that I could do for every student in this classroom? If you're gonna make cookies for everybody, we love it, do it. But, maybe bringing one student cookies because they're your favorite student, well, not so much. All right? Let's see. I don't know that we have time for personal scenarios at the moment, but if you'd like to stay afterwards and get into any personal situations you might have that have brought up questions, you're absolutely free to do that. I'm going to end this section on boundaries with this wonderful quote by Brene Brown, which says, boundaries are a prerequisite for compassion and empathy. We cannot connect with someone unless we're clear about where we end and they begin. If there's no autonomy between people, then there's no compassion or empathy, just enmeshment. I don't want us to come away from this training thinking boundaries mean that we are not friends with our students. Boundaries mean that we cannot love our students or have a relationship with them or be unkind to them. It means that we are making space for compassion and empathy, and we're doing that in a way that is healthy. All right? And so that's really what our goal is with boundaries. Questions before we move on to the next section? You guys have already brought up such wonderful stuff. Okay, we'll move right along. All right. Some of you might recognize this picture. What feelings come to mind when you see this picture? How do you feel when you look at this?
Happy?
Happy? Okay. Does anybody else have any other feelings besides happy when you look at this?
I feel warm. when I
Warm.
see that, yeah.
Okay. You're thinking of the sun on the river. Okay, good.
Yahoo.
Yahoo!
Yeah.
Summer fun, right? This is a picture of the Boise River, if you're not familiar, and this is I don't remember the name of this bridge, but many people jump off of it. The Friendship Bridge, thank you very much. It's a very popular spot on the Boise River. I spend many hours on the Boise River every summer, and I love it. However, I had a conversation with a family member, someone in my family, who he floated down the river as a child and got stuck in the brush on the side of the river and feared for his life. I don't know whether he, got poked by some sticks, but he was stuck there while his family floated away.
Oh.
And that was quite traumatizing to him. And he has never, ever floated the river since. And him and his family have never floated the river. So what I want us to consider here is that we may see this picture and assume this is a happy, fun picture. Look at the sun, look at the colors. Everybody looks like they're having fun. It may not evoke the same feeling for every person. This picture may, and actually when I gave this training somewhere else, someone told me that this picture looked like anxiety for them because they do not like floating the river. So it's important to consider that not everybody is coming from the same place that we are. All right? So for the sake of this presentation, we are going to define bias as a tendency, inclination, or prejudice toward or against something or someone. Okay? Very broad here. Basically, it's something in your head that makes you think something else when you see something or someone. Maybe good, it may be bad. So what are some examples of common biases that we encounter?
Prejudice.
Racial prejudice, that's the big one. That's kind of the hot one right now, right? What else?
Size of the person sometimes
Okay, what do you mean by that?
people make judgments, someone's over.
Okay, very good, very good.
There's religious prejudice.
Religious prejudice, perfect.
Sexual.
Yep, perfect.
Where people come from?
Yep,
As a California, I get that a lot.
okay, yes. Yes, you would understand that as someone from California, perfect. Yes, sexual preferences, there may be prejudice against that. What about someone who is in a wheelchair or has crutches? You might assume some things about that person, right? You might assume that they need help with certain things, right? When we're talking about these assumptions, it's important to acknowledge that we're not talking about bias as a naughty word. This is something that may be good, it may be bad, okay? So going right along with that, I want to read this quote from the American Bar Association. Can anybody see that well enough to read it out loud for us? Please, thank you.
We all have biases that affect all aspects of our lives and the lives of others with whom we interact. Although people have both explicit and implicit biases, the implicit ones are the most concerning because they are the ones we don't recognize we have. Everyone has biases, it's true. Having a bias doesn't make you a bad person. However, and not every bias is negative or hurtful. It's not recognizing biases that can lead to bad decisions at work, in life, and in relationships.
Thank you so much for reading that. Okay, so this is what our focus is for this last section of the presentation, is recognizing bias. All of us have it. You cannot avoid it. Just because we are all wonderful people who work at Learning Lab and love everybody does not mean that you're not biased. I am biased. You are all biased. It's because we all grew up a certain way with certain ideas in a certain place. In really what we are aiming for is recognizing biases within ourselves so as to get to know and appreciate everyone equally. Okay, so this is not a guilt trip about anybody who has felt bias towards another person. We all do it. But it's really important to look at it and say, oh, okay, interesting. I recognize that about myself, and I may have a conversation differently next time. Okay? So, some questions to ask ourselves to recognize these biases. What core beliefs do I hold? How might these beliefs limit me or enable me and the students? How do I react to people from different backgrounds? Do I hold stereotypes or assumptions about a particular social or cultural group? Do my words and actions actually reflect my intentions? Do I put myself in the shoes of the other person and empathize with their situation, even if I don't relate to it? Okay, within our group, I would like for us to keep the word assumptions on the forefront of our minds, okay? Rather than thinking the word bias can be kind of heavy, maybe assumptions feels a little more applicable. So, how could bias manifest itself in our classrooms? What do you think? We all are here and we all care. So, what does that actually look like? Yes.
Over time, I've had to work on my bias that when I first came here and started volunteering, I would see some of our female students from the Middle East, and if they were in hijabs or veiled, I would automatically have a sense as a female where I wanted to feel sorry for them, like, oh, you're probably not educated, you probably weren't able to go to school. I kind of flipped to a more extreme
Yes.
version of the Middle East, and I've come to find out that these women are wildly, many of them educated.
Yeah.
And so I've really had to, just because you're wearing the clothes you're wearing.
Absolutely.
And so as a Western woman, I've had to work.
Oh, such a good example. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yes.
That's what I was gonna say.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Anybody else? Definitely exists. And it's not that it's something like, oh, I dislike this person
Oh,
because of
yeah,
the way they
no.
look.
It's
more
just about like, how I
Exactly.
want to help you and how I want to, and then you talk to these folks and it's like, okay, you know 6 languages and you know more of the world than I'll,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. That is exactly what I had in mind. Unequal treatment in the way that maybe we're giving more attention to someone that we assume needs it. Okay, assumptions about needs, misunderstandings. This can manifest itself. Maybe a student will not make eye contact with you. Maybe they do not smile at you. That might be a cultural show of their respecting your authority as a tutor. And so, you know, thinking, oh, I don't know if I want to be paired with the student because I really don't think they like me, that might be a misunderstanding. And so really just checking ourselves and thinking, okay, where is the student coming from? Am I making assumptions about what they think of me? Or maybe the way they talk to me, I'm making assumptions about that. Generalizations, because you're from Latin America, you love tacos and you love to dance. I mean, right?
Yeah.
Don't we feel that way sometimes? And again, I am not free of this. I love pozole myself, and so I'm always so excited when I have a student from Mexico, and I'm always thinking to myself, oh, I hope they bring pozole to the class party. However, maybe they don't like pozole, maybe they've never had it, it's not from the part of Mexico they're from, right? And so just really steering clear of these blanket statements that we tend to make.
What is pozole?
It is, it's amazing. It's a soup with hominy
Mhm.
and meat and
Yeah.
chilies, and
Mhm.
it's very, very
If you go to
delicious if
New
you ever have the
Mexico,
chance.
That's a big issue in Mexico.
Yes.
So the misunderstandings, when the student was doing really well, I gave her the thumbs up on something she had just done, and she's from Afghanistan, and she kind of looked at me like, why did you give me the thumbs up?
Yeah.
And I noticed that a couple more times, and I spoke to a friend of mine that was a veteran from Afghanistan, he said that that's an inappropriate,
Gesture.
thumbs up as a gesture.
Yeah. Yes, that is something I've heard that before, and it's something that I need to be aware of as
Yeah.
a teacher as well.
Yeah.
You just never know things like that. And again, it's okay. Like how would we don't expect you to come into learning lab knowing all of those things, but being able to say, oh, I didn't know that. Next time I might not do that again. That's really what our aim is here.
That would be.
Thank you
nice
so
to
much.
learn from a teacher.
It would be,
Because.
We do
I
that.
all the time.
Yeah, no, I just noticed her face change.
Yeah.
Not the way that I was expecting.
And we may not know that either. And so, yeah, learning those things from each other, that's wonderful.
I know Mary Jane does that at Garfield. We'll have things like or just expressions, what is an
Uh-huh.
expression, and just kind of do that, kind of get different ideas of what some people say and what.
Yeah, perfect.
So.
Very good. Thank you so much for your personal examples. That is so helpful in kind of understanding all of this. Okay, for this last portion, it may get a little uncomfortable. Stick with me. That's okay. This is from a training that I took from Literacy Minnesota, which is a wonderful organization that gives lots of free trainings if you're interested. I think it's very applicable to the work that we do. And this training was on microaggressions. Who can read this for me? Who can see it?
I will.
Yes, thank you.
A statement, action, or incident regarded as an instance of indirect, subtle, or unintentional discrimination against members of a marginalized group, such as a racial or ethnic minority.
Perfect. Okay, we are going to watch a video that gives us some examples, exaggerated examples of what microaggressions look like, okay? If this video makes you feel uncomfortable, again, it's okay. Thank you for leaning into it with me. We're being vulnerable right now, and this is a safe place. If it elicits a laugh from you, that's okay too, okay? So here we go together, and some of you may have seen this with me before.
So you're not good at golf, but you're white. People of color have to deal with racial microaggressions every single day. So microaggressions are those little unintentional insults that basically see people of color as stereotypes, which got me thinking, what if white people had to deal with racial microaggressions?
So like, where are you from? No, like, where are you really from?
Why do I have an accent? Like a Swedish accent.
You know, your English is really, really good. It's like, I can't even tell you have an accent or anything.
I don't have an accent.
No, that's what I'm saying.
You don't speak Gaelic?
You don't speak German? Can you say a curse word in European?
You know, like, what does that even mean?
Hey Connor, you know about NASCAR stuff, right? Can you take a look at this?
Can you teach me how to line dance?
Play the banjo?
Act entitled in the supermarket. Love white food. No real flavor to it. Never an upset tummy.
You're so exotic.
How do you get your hair like that? I love how it's so limp. Ew, why does it feel like that? Oh my God, so it just does that? No, you are really pretty for a white girl.
Your eyes are so brown, like this.
You know who you look like? Kenny Chesney. Zach Braff.
Emma Stone.
Rachel Maddow.
My friend Chad. Maybe you know him, because he's white too.
No, Emma Watson.
Not Macklemore. What's the other guy?
Is it Emma Thompson?
It's CHAD, like Chad.
One of the Emmas. You look like an Emma.
You know who you look like? I bet you hear this all the time. Jeffrey Dahmer. How does it feel to be the token white guy in the office? Hey, Connor, can we get a white perspective on this? I love everything about white culture. You guys are like so fun. What do you mean you don't listen to Creed? You're white.
You've never tried meth. But you're white.
You don't act like a normal white person.
You're not really white though.
I'm really white. I'm whiter than you are. So, did all your ancestors own slaves?
No, but of course he wishes that he could still own slaves. That's a part of his culture.
Bryce, back me up on this one. The thing you have to understand about white
No,
culture
I
is
went
that
to an
white people are.
historically white college, so I
Okay,
know
but
about
I
white
back
culture.
moved
Okay,
to
it was a-
Europe. So can you see how ridiculous this was? I know. Story of my life. If you've ever experienced microaggressions because of your race, gender, sexuality, or body type, go ahead and vent about it in the comments.
Can you teach me how to like take a really popular rap song and like make it a ukulele song? It's so cool. I think it's so cool how you guys do that.
Okay. So, thank you for laughing. It is kind of outrageous, right? However, it's also things that happen, right? And I love how at the beginning of the video, she mentions it's unintentional insults. Because that's what it is. It's not that we're ever trying to be malicious, but just assumptions that we make and then things that come about out of our mouths that just are inappropriate. I have done it. I've done it in front of a classroom before and it's embarrassing, but it's important to be able to look at that and say, okay, I recognize that I made a huge generalization there and I will not do that next time. A personal experience that I would like to share about kind of an assumption that I made about a person would be when I was in high school. I was in a biology class, and at the high school I attended, Bora High School, there was a refugee bridge program there when I was there, which was wonderful. I had the opportunity to attend my classes alongside refugees from all kinds of places. And in this biology class, there was one refugee student, and I had a lot of other friends in this class. So the end of the semester, had a great time in this class, loved it, became friends with everybody, except for that one student. And she wore a hijab, and I looked at her and I had this realization that I had some bias deep within myself. It was not explicit. Of course, I believe that I love everybody, that I respect everybody, that I would become friends with anybody, regardless of where they're from or what they look like. However, the fact was that she was the only person in the whole class who I hadn't talked to all semester.
Yeah.
And that was such an eye-opening moment for me to recognize that even though I don't think I'm a biased person, I do have biases. We all do. And it's so important to be able to look within ourselves, recognize them, and then overcome them. Okay? We are short on time. You all shared so many wonderful comments. I would like to end with a wonderful quote from an awesome TED Talk. If you haven't seen this TED Talk, I think it's called A Single Story. Please go and watch it. It's definitely worth the time. This quote says, "The single story creates stereotypes, and the problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story." Okay, our students are wonderfully diverse, complete human beings. They have a country that they're from, but just because there are certain practices, religions, cultures, foods from that country, that does not define them. They are more than that. And so I invite us all, including myself, to take time to get to know our students on a personal level, rather than making assumptions about who they are based off of the way they look or where they're from. Okay? Any questions, comments, or concerns to wrap things up?
Are there cultural problems with, for instance, a female might not want to work with a male?
Thank you for bringing that up. Hopefully, as teachers, we are aware of that, and we do honor that. Absolutely. It may be a part of a student's religion, or maybe just a cultural practice, but we do honor that. And if you happen to be aware of that as a tutor, and you think maybe the teacher's not, based off of how we're pairing people, please let us know. We want everybody to feel comfortable. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for attending today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Let's stay.